Okay, I think that's it. I think I have now all people, hopefully they are all here. Yeah, any question or anything before I begin? Yeah,
no, doctor, there is no question.
Yeah, just checking about this attendance application. Let me see what's this. Okay, so yeah, to go back to the text. Last time I think I stopped. Yeah, I was here. Yeah, I think I was. I think I did this correct last time. I think I was here in the question about expanding world literature, correct? In this introduction, I think I stopped here. This is.
Yes.
Can you see my
Yes.
screen now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I think I stopped here, correct? And yeah. Now, with this here, you can see with Goethe, again, I go back to Goethe. In this section, we see him really, as we said, as the real founder of the term itself, world literature. He was the first man to use the term, to say world literature. Now, you can see in this introduction, again, we have further quotations, or if you like, as you can see, I copied this for you exactly as it is from the book, from this introduction. As you can see, this is in chapter 2, Wolfgang Goethe. Now, as you can see, as I said, I copied it as it is. As you can see here, we say page 9 in the original page numbering, unlike the one here on the right. This one here on the right, this is this file's page. Anyway, that's not that's not really important for the moment. But really, here you have a bit longer chapter about Goethe. But I'll try to summarize it, and as you can see, I have highlighted some of these ideas to you here in this chapter. Goethe, of course, as I mentioned maybe to you last time, he was the first man, I think, to use the term, as we said, because somebody is saying that if you like, in his own fashion, he invented or he coined the term world literature. And of course, Goethe was such a huge figure in literature, in poetry, and in the novel and the short stories and the novels. And, you know, I think he wrote a lot of stuff. But with and that's why, if you like, many people thought that he was really very, very important, to the extent that he was a legendary figure, especially in his publication of his Sorrows of Young Werner. And this is, you can see here, it said, or Werther, people say Werther and Werner, or Werther, you know, it's in the, of course, in the German language, as you can see, the translation Sorrows of Young Werther, published 1774, originally in German. Now, this novel really was such an important text, and you know, for many people, they thought that he was the real founder of Romanticism in Europe. And I think this is really the idea that it says here, that, of course, when you think about it in terms of the English background, we say yes, it was towards the beginning of the first movements or the first elements of Romanticism. Later, 18th century, beginning of 19th century, as you can see there, with figures like him and Schiller and many other people. Now, of course, as I said, in England, really the idea, we know this through Wordsworth and Coleridge and Byron and Keats and Shelley and these big names in the English literature and poetry, really. Especially here, we're talking about poetry in the Romantic period in the 1810, 1820s, 1830s, and 40s and 50s. Really, the first 50 years of the 1800s in England or in Britain, really the if you like, the expansion and the real flourishing and development and absolute richness of Romanticism, especially in poetry, as I said, by these people I'm saying here: Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, Byron, Lord Byron, and Shelley, and people like that. And I think they were absolutely influential in every sense. Now, Goethe was a bit earlier than these people, of course. We can say that he was a real influence and a real founder and a real forerunner for what we call really Romanticism throughout Europe, because the English, to be honest with you, the English did not invent Romanticism. The English actually, if you it's funny to say that the English have really never invented anything. In a way, they have taken everything from France or Germany, really, to be honest. And this is really the funny thing. It's really like the Americans. In the same way, really, they have borrowed, if not taken or stolen a lot of stuff, really, from France, from the French and the Germans, to be honest. This is really the real truth about everything. And I'm talking here, of course, about literature, and I'm sure about that. So Goethe, that's why he was talking about his, if you like, he was trying to show us his own importance, his own really preference, his own really position as a great man in the German and, if you like, in the European literature. That's why, as I mentioned last time briefly, he thought that the Germans were the great, if you like, he said, the great people who cared, who, I don't know, I mean, that's what he said, or that's what they believe. And that's maybe part of the arrogance of the German maybe culture, or I don't know. I mean, this is really maybe too much to say, but this is the idea. He was, I'm saying here, the real founder of Romanticism in Europe, okay? Now, Goethe, as I said, here you have to more, if you like, discussions about that. Here, the real, if you like, founder or the real position of the German language or the German culture and the importance of that, especially, as I said, I think in these around maybe 100 years, 50s, 1750s till really 1900s, to be honest, all the philosophers from Nietzsche, Marx, Engels, Schopenhauer, and those great names really in philosophy, in thinking, in all these big things really came from Germany. And that's the honest truth, So here we say the Weimar School, it was really the main, if you like, the main place there in Weimar. And that's why here the Saxe and Weimar area In Weimar, notice here, in Weimar, the following and following the extended trip to Italy from 1786 to 1788, Goethe reneged on his early romanticism and became again, or with Schiller, if you like, the so-called, if you like, the Weimar classicism, as a big name or school. I'm not really keen about it at the moment to worry you about all these terms, but again, to just highlight the idea about romanticism, humanism, and all this carry on about enlightenment or Renaissance, because you know, when you look about the Renaissance in Italy or in England, maybe during Shakespeare's time, even later, of course, it was something else. But in Germany at that time, they used the word enlightenment, not really the word Renaissance. Especially during that time, Goethe wrote his huge book called Faust. It's about the myth of Faust. And you know, Faust, if you remember maybe Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, if you, anybody heard of Dr. Faustus? Girls? Shaima? Zainab?
No, doctor.
Sarah? Oh, Dr. Faustus. Shaima? My God, I have 25 people in this group and none of you knows or heard Sarah. Ya Sarah, ya Harasi. Hello?
This is
think
the
he's the
first time
author
I
of.
hear his name, Doctor.
Sorry?
Is he the one who wrote
I
Life
will-
and Death? I'm not sure, but
Ibtihal, please, Ibtihal, go on, and then I'll go back to Sarah.
I'm not sure, but I think he is the one who wrote the novel of Life and Death.
The
Is he
novel.
that?
With the title called The Life and Death?
Yeah.
No. I said Christopher, Dr. Faustus, I said Dr. Faustus is a name of a play written by, Dr. Faustus. Christopher Marlowe, have you heard of Christopher Marlowe? Sarah, Zainab, Maitha, Shaima. Sarah, you wanted to say something?
I think he's from the Elizabethan era, and he was at the time of Shakespeare, maybe.
Very good.
I think, I'm
Maitha.
not very sure.
Maitha, yeah, go on.
That's what I all know.
That's what you know. Well, Dr. Faustus. You know, I feel angry really, especially with the arts students. How many arts students do you have here? I think half of you, more than half, are arts students. And you have no idea about Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. Marlowe was a contemporary to Shakespeare, and he wrote this big play called Dr. Faustus. Faustus, the man who sold his heart, who sold himself, his body, his soul to the devil in return for power. He sold his soul for the devil. He signed a contract with the devil for 25 years to have supreme power to give him the supreme power to control the world for 25 years or 24 years. Do you know the story, Mayfa?
No, doctor, I don't know it.
Somebody was saying that she said it's a novel. Oh, sorry, this is, yeah, sorry, I'm looking at the chat. Let me check. Somebody was saying, oh, Sarah, she said, there's a film about it, but I never knew it's a novel. Sarah, it's not a novel, it's a play. It's a tragedy. It is a play, it's a tragedy written by Christopher Marlowe, who wrote it, I think, around 16 something. I'm not sure exactly the date, but 16 something, or maybe, yeah, about 16,100, 16,1, 16,2, or 16,3. I'm not sure exactly, but he was writing at the time of Shakespeare, and Shakespeare died 1616. So Marlowe was writing around this time, maybe it's 16 something, 1 or 2, or even 1590 something. I'm not sure about the date, but it's Shakespeare's time, and it's a huge play. It's about this man called Mephistopheles. Well, not Mephistopheles. I mean, the devil was called Mephistopheles, and the character called Faustus, and he was a doctor. And Dr. Faustus, he had such a huge knowledge, and he wanted more power, and he wanted more knowledge, and he signed a contract with the devil, Mephistopheles, and he told him that to give him more power in return for his life. He said, and he signed this with blood, because later on, of course, he killed him and he took him to hell. And at the end of the day, you know, the play really is a funny, amazing, terrible play about how man, in what way we people are crazy about power, and we want to have power, you know, and this is, of course, Christopher Marlowe was criticizing society in this way, how we people are sick about wanting power. And of course, we are lured and tempted by the devil. And here, of course, as the play is really talking about here, at the end of the play, of course, Faustus was regretting, but it was too late. He was regretting and feeling sorry, and he wanted to change, but he could not because it was too late, and he was taken to hell. And the play really was such a huge. I got curious to know exactly. I want to see exactly when it was published, because I don't like. Oh, somebody killed, yeah. Dr. Foss, again, somebody said a novel, yeah, by Thomas Mann. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's interesting. Let me. I'm looking for. Yeah, but just I wanted to check Marlowe's. Yeah, Christopher Marlowe's. Yeah, you can see it here. Yeah, 1592. Yeah. I thought it was written sometimes between 1589 and 1592, and may have been, yeah, in 1593, and published, as you can see, in this Jacobean Elizabethan time. Yeah, well, I thought this is because this is the time when Shakespeare also was writing. And as I said, Christopher Marlowe was you know, writing at that time, because he died actually in the same year, because Shakespeare lived, as I said, till 1616, but Marlowe died a young man, really. He did not live much. He was killed because he was such a troublemaker. He died 1593, the same year maybe, or the year before it was acted or written or published. Anyway, so the idea I was trying to say, what was it? I was saying that Goethe actually talked about this myth called Faustus. Here, I mention here to you in this. Yeah, where is it? I had to go back to my screen. You can see it again? You can see my screen again?
Yes, doctor, we can.
Yeah, good. Yeah, really, this is the idea that, if you like, Goethe also wrote or talked about this. As you can see, really, he wrote a whole play called Faust. Again, because it was a myth. Was he taking, maybe, I don't know, was he taking something, or did he take, or was he influenced by Marlowe before him, 200 years before? Could be. I'm not saying anything here. Could be. But also I'm saying that Goethe wrote something about that and so on. Now, really, that's too much to talk about him as a man of letters, but I will go quickly to his ideas about world literature. Now, Goethe, I say, at various times during his years, he used the term world literature, and he talked about it and mentioned it in so many ways, and sometimes contradictory ways, and he had so many ideas about it. Most of the commonly Goethe thing, if you like, Goethe assumed, or to say that world literature as the circulation of ideas, and here, as you can see, I'm quoting what this chapter is saying here. Notice, most commonly Goethe is assumed to have seen world literature as the circulation of ideas, themes, and forms between the literati of, in first instance, Europe and possibly beyond. Now, this sentence, and notice the word literati, you know, to use the Latin phrase he's using here, or literature. Yeah, I mean, that's the idea, the circulation of ideas, to borrow, you know, all the ideas from other European nations, you know, Germany, Italy, France, Belgium, Holland, going back to maybe Russia, or, you know, to all these places in Europe, just Western, really, for him, European culture. That's the idea, to circulate ideas and themes and so on. In a way, that's his original idea, and I think that's a good idea to say that's to him what is world literature. We, for example, he says, we Germans can help all other nations, and they can help us, you know, by borrowing and lending. We borrow and lend, you know, we borrow from them, we lend them what we have, and so on. He saw this circulation as speeding up because of the economic and technical developments, and particularly because of the rapid rise and spread of literary journals across Europe. Yeah, so because he was saying, since we are having this printing technology, because at that time, around 1700s, I think the first, I mean, the printing technology started before that, but I'm saying here the idea that with the development of technology, I think they were saying that also we have to borrow and take and so on from each other. So not just books, he said, also from journals, you know, journals, magazines, newspapers, and so on. So this he saw as a positive development, knitting the peoples of Europe closer together. Notice here the word knitting, you know, to connect, absolutely connect the people of Europe together. And really, you know, I think Europeans are really very, I think they are really, I don't know. I mean, this is really amazing to say, but it's a shame. We Arabs, we speak the same language. We nearly have the same religion, all of us, nearly. We have the same history. We have the same, you know, culture, and we speak the same language, and we pray. I don't know. We have, this is really amazing. And we are not united, whereas Europeans have so many different languages, so many different cultures, so many different maybe creeds, and so many histories, different backgrounds, etc., etc. And now they have, you know, what's called European Union, and they have one currency which is called euro. You know, they knew how to unite themselves. You know, I feel really bad about it sometimes when you say, why? You know, why can't we? You know, and this is really amazing thing. The word here, knitting, to knit the peoples. Notice, peoples, not people, not ash-sha'b, but shu'ub. And really, this is true. You know, and that's why we say al-umma al-arabiyya, isn't it? We say al-umma al-arabiyya wa al-sha'b al-arabi. Correct? We don't say al-shu'ub al-arabiyya, no shu'ub, really. And no umam. We say al-umma, means one nation. And we say al-umma al-islamiyya, isn't it? One nation, isn't it? We don't say al-umma al-Europiyya. You see what I mean? Really, the idea here is, to me, is, you know, what you think about it is so romantic to think about this. So really, that's his idea, to say, to unite Europeans together through understanding each other's languages and cultures and so on and so forth. And why? Because he said, we want to understand each other. We want to coexist, really to coexist. And this is what we said later on, I think even last time, and we will see this, the question of tolerance. Tolerance. And I said to you the word tolerance. Yeah, it's said here, notice, and I think I should highlight it here. Tolerance, well, I should, just the word tolerance, I think I will highlight, yeah. And I translated this to you last time. Where is the, yeah. You know, tolerance, I said to you, I said last time about the exact word in Arabic we have. Really, it's very good that we tolerate each other, we understand each other, we help each other, we like each other, we have no problems with each other, and so on. So that the idea of accepting, understanding, and so on. And I think this is a very good idea. I think that's a very good idea. It's only human. It's only human to do that. And that's what Goethe really originally wanted to say, that world literature will make us more human, will make us more understandable. We understand, we tolerate, we accept each other. So these same developments, however, also held the danger of cheap, you know, commercialization. Goethe talked, you know, Borg said this. He saw world literature as the province of the learned. Here we're not saying about, you know, world literature that everything which is supposed to be cheaply, any cheap thing could be seen as world literature. No, we're talking about really the valuable thing. You know, he said only those really who are good and educated and civilized and learned and so on. And that's what he said. It's the job of the educated people. You know, that's what he means. Use the word the learned. And I say the learned, not learned, you know, meaning those who are really educated. He or his ideas, again, notice here, the understanding and tolerance were intimately linked to his interests in humanism. You know, this is again the idea. Maybe if I highlight this again to you, again, I think this would be interesting to say about the idea of humanism, which I just mentioned here, both in its original Renaissance form and in the guise of the new humanism. So I'm saying again here, he definitely did not perceive of world literature as a canon of world masterpieces, although this is the meaning that rapidly came to be associated with the term after Goethe's death, with the rise of literary historiography as the middle of the 19th century. So again, we say here that Goethe did not say that world literature is only to do with the canon or those main important canonized works or, you know, masterpieces. Really, he maybe didn't say that. He never really said the masterpieces, only take the masterpieces, only take the important books. And who said important? Who decides? Who decides which is important and which is not? You know, this is the idea. Maybe Goethe really didn't say that. But you see, critics and people after him said that that's what he said. You know, they believe that's what he meant. Goethe really gave us, you know, here, as you can see, I have highlighted a lot of this for you. You can see it. But since really I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, Goethe gave us, you know, snapshots or some points, and I'm going to go through them with you quickly here. Now, for him, notice, everywhere we hear and read of the progress of the human race, of the broader view of international and human relations, since it's not only for, since it's not my office here to define or qualify these broad generalities, you know, from generalization, really. I shall merely acquaint my friends with my conviction that there is being formed a universal world literature. That's Goethe himself writing letters. You know, I should have mentioned at the beginning, because here we say Goethe's letters. That's his own letters to his friends and to his relatives, and they were published here. And that's his own. He's saying what he noticed. These are part of diaries. They say diary 15th January 1827, and dedicated here. You can say here what he says. You know, he's not saying the broad general or as you say generalities. He's just saying that world literature is something that has an honorable role, a good role. Notice, an honorable role is reversed for us Germans. All the nations review of our work, they praise, censure, accept and reject, imitate and represent or misrepresent us, open or close their hearts to us. All this we must accept with equanimity, since the attitude or this attitude taken as a whole is great value to us. You know, this is Goethe's own words, he's saying. He said, many people think of us as a great nation, so why don't we act this and have this honorable role? We have this honorable role to play as a big nation, to play maybe this big role, to help and to tell or maybe teach or educate or whatever, even those people who do not like us, but still we can help them. And this is the idea here he wants to say. He said, all other nations look at us, and I think that's true. Remember, this is, you know, Goethe saying this even before Marx and Engels and Nietzsche and Max Weber and all these great names, even in psychology, you know, because they were really, as I said, before, I mean, he's writing before them, as if he was really, you know, if you like, foreshadowing what's going to happen later as an important nation. So he goes on to say that we Germans have a big position, have a big role to play, and we should play it. We have an honorable position, and we should act it as an honorable position. And yeah, we can do that, and we can help other people in doing this. Now, in number 3 here said, there's another letter. He said, I'm convinced that the world literature is in process of formation, in a process of formation, as if to say, there's no fixed world literature. It's always in the making, still in the making, in the process of being made. And this is the idea, making or formation. That is, the nations are in favor of it, and for this reason make friendly overtures. The German can and should be most active in this respect. He has a fine part to play in this great mutual approach. You know, he goes back to the idea that we Germans can do a good job here, because still world literature is being built, and we can have a big role in building it up. You know, really, this is the idea, process of formation. And another one here, number 4, again, he says, notice, poetry is the common property of all mankind, and it's manifest everywhere in all ages, in hundreds and hundreds of people. Yeah, you know, I think this is, he said that. You know, and I think this is what Marxism later said, the common property of literature. We all have the ownership of the language. The language is not owned by one single person. The language is not owned by one single nation. No. You know, he's saying it's the common property of all mankind. كل البشرية. Notice, كل البشرية. Yeah, all mankind. And that's manifest everywhere. Isn't it? If you want to say this, it's very clear. Everywhere. You can see that absolutely clear, you know, shining clear everywhere. And in all ages. And he said, hundreds and hundreds of people. The only difference is that some express themselves a little better and are on top of a little longer. Yeah, he said, maybe we are lucky. You know, some people are lucky to say in a good way, they are better than us. Maybe, okay, fine. And that's natural, that's normal. There are people who are better than others. There are men and women everywhere who are better than each other. Yeah, that's not, we are not all equal. We are not equal, isn't it? We are not equal all the time in terms of, you know, our intelligence or our capacity of, and so on. So I'm saying here, we're not saying we are all talented. And I think this is the idea. We are all human beings, but we are different. We have maybe different mental power. Each one of us is maybe different, maybe more talented or less talented. And we have idiots. We have stupid and crazy people everywhere. You know, that's natural. So that's why you say here, the poetic talent. And that's what he means. Poetic talent is not very rare and should not pride himself on having composed a good poem. You know, he said, people should not be arrogant, should not be arrogant to say, wow, I'm talented, I did this, you know? So the idea really, he wants to say that people can help each other and, you know, do this in so many ways. If you like, he said, we Germans do not look beyond the narrow confines of our immediate surroundings. We easily develop this pedantic pride. You know, he goes on to say, in a way, he's saying we Germans are a bit arrogant. We are proud. We have great ideas, but we should not be arrogant. And you know, this is really true in a way, because if you go back to, as I said, to the attitude that Hitler, for example, the mentality that Hitler took, he said that the Aryan race, or the European white, absolutely white race is the superior race. Well, you know, this is what we mean here by arrogance, and he's saying we can educate and so on. And I think that's why Hitler misrepresented this idea, and he caused this terrible, if you like, later on in the, you know, in the First World War and the Second World War, really, about this mentality, about the complete superiority of the German race, which is, as I said, really it was misrepresented by people like that. You know, and really this is the attitude he wants to say. He said, we have a job to do. We can help. We are people, we are human, we can help each other. And really, this is his idea. Now, in number 6, I want to move quicker here. Notice, in another letter, he said, in this connection, it might be added that I call world literature develops in the first place when the difference that prevail within one nation are resolved through the understanding and judgment of the rest. You know, he's repeating the same thing, that world literature is something that can develop, can become when we know our position. And when he said, you notice, when we know that there are differences, you know, notice here, develops in the first place when the differences that exist within one nation are resolved. When you know yourself and you solve how you sort out your differences, then things will be fine. And again, he said, when you know your own self, you can help your neighbor. When you sort out your own problem, you can sort out other problems or outside problems. And that's what he means there. The differences that exist within one nation are solved through the understanding and judgment of the rest. And I think he was right there in so many ways. Notice here again, he wants to say in this letter, every nation indeed, when its turn comes, feels that tension, which, like the attractive power of physical bodies, draws one towards the other, and eventually will unite in one universal sympathy, all the races of which humanity consists. The endeavor of scholars to understand one another and compare one another's work is by no means new. You know, he wants to say here, of course, he's giving the role to those educated, as I said, the role of the educated people. And he said, the scholars, you know, the endeavor, you know, the real effort, the real work done by educated people, by scholars who are supposedly to be the educated. And we call this sometimes the elite, you know. When the educated people understand, he said, they know each other and they compare their own work together. This, I think, would help more in a way. And how do you do that? He said, you know, he goes on to say, travel, the study of languages, periodical literature have taken the place of that universal language and established many intimate and harmonious relations which it could never cultivate. Even the nations that devote themselves chiefly to trade and industry are most concerned with this exchange of ideas. And he goes on and on about that. And I think that's the same idea he's saying about the question of, you know, intercommunication, intercultural communication, really, not just, you know, within the same culture, but he wants to say cultural other. That's why he said travel, and that's why other languages. And he said periodical literature. And you say universal languages or universal language. And he said, you know, again, countries and nations and so on. You know, that's what he's saying, that when all these nations develop this kind of feeling, and especially through trade, through business, and so on, you know, that, for example, you know, that's what happened really in reality when you look at it. When you look at it, you know that Indonesia, for example, really Indonesia and Malaysia and all these places, they really got even Islam as a religion through traders, through merchants and commercial people and so on. So it's really something can be done, and that's what of course Goethe is saying here, to say that this can help, you know, establish a good really thing here through the world or through world literature. Again, I think here I highlighted this again in the same way. Notice I will read this for you. Several societies now exist for the purpose of making the British Isles acquainted with the continent, and are working effectively and with a practical unanimity of opinion. We continentals can learn from them the intellectual background of the time across the channel, what they are thinking and what their judgments about things are. You see, so here, you know, he's really a humble man. He's really in this way here. He's saying, don't think you are, you know, the most intelligent nation as Germans. We can look across other nations and we can cross the channel to England, he said. We can learn from the English, he said. And as I told you at the beginning, really, you know, it's not really me only who said that. And I think I've heard this many times, especially in literature, many things, that I think the only creation, if you like, I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm saying this is recently, I should say, I'm saying recently, about 200 or 300 years, 200-300 years or even more, I don't know. I mean, I said that the English really took nearly everything from the French or the Germans, really. And here he's saying we can learn from the English. Why not? We can look at them. Yeah, somebody asking something, or somebody leaving, or somebody. Oh, somebody is coming or going. Or, okay. Really, this is this Google Meet, this Google attendance is really stupid. It's not working properly. Anyway, I know that I have now 25 people. That means you are all here. No, actually one missing. There's one person missing. I'll check that later. I don't know, this is... Can you please write your name in the chat so I can see who's, or maybe later I will. No, I can see your names. You don't need, no, don't write in the chat because I can see your names here in the people, but there's one person still no problem. I will find out. Okay, I was reading this one here again to go back to Goethe. Notice he said, we continentals can learn from them the intellectual background of the time across the channel, what they are thinking and what their judgments about things are. On the whole, we acknowledge gladly that they go about the work with intense seriousness, with industry and tolerance and general goodwill. The result for us will be that we shall be compelled to think again of our own recent literature, which we will have in some measure already put to one side, and to consider and examine it anew. Especially worthy of notice is their profitable method of starting with new considerable author and going over the whole field in which he worked. You know, so you can see here that really Goethe is saying we should not be worried about anybody's ideas or opinions. We should admire them and learn from them, and we get good things from them. Why not? And he, you know, that's what he said. We can admire the way they look at certain authors and the way they measure things. And I think this is a good idea that Goethe here is talking about world literature. I don't know. I mean, there are many more and more ideas here to be mentioned, but I have not highlighted the rest of this for you. Please try to read this on your own and quickly try to find out the main points that you should really, if you like. Let me see. Yeah. You know, he goes back in the next few points talking about the French in the same way. You know, he comes back to the idea of world literature. In number 16, he said, you know, world literature, European or world literature, again in another conversation. He said, in this conversation also there appeared references to a common European or world literature, one of the favorite themes of the writer, his life, which is still haunted by spirits of his imagination. Again, in his introduction, he wrote an introduction to Thomas Carlyle. You know, Thomas Carlyle, the English philosopher and thinker. Again, in here he said, Life of Schiller. There has some time been talk of a universal world literature, and you know, he goes on about that. Again, the question of the idea whether to use universal or world literature in the same way, and he goes on to theorize about that. Again, he said, if world literature, such as it is inevitable with the ever-increasing facility of communication, is to be in the near future, we must expect from it nothing more and nothing different from what it is, or what it can and does accomplish. In other words, don't expect too much unless you do it yourself. Really, the world, he said, the wide world, he said, extensive as it is only an expanded fatherland, and will, if looked at aright, be able to give us no more than what our home soil can endow us with also. Again, you know, when he's saying here fatherland, I think this is, you know, an amazing thing. Yeah, of course. You know, again, here he's referring to the idea of humanism and all nations as being one together as humans. Again, you say about the serious and intellectual meets with less success. You know, I don't know if I want to read all this for you. You can, I think you can do that. I think here I will read this slide really. The last bits here, I think if I can maybe highlight this a little bit, and I will show you that. Notice here, for after all is the only way towards a general world literature, for all nations to learn their relation each to the other, and each is bound to find in the other something attractive and something repellent, something worthy of emulation and something to be avoided. In other words, he said, I'm not saying that in world literature we take everything. You know, you are bound to find something good and something bad and something interesting and something, etc. So you don't need to copy everything. And I think this is true, you know. Not everything is as valuable as everything else. And that's why here he wants to really go back to the idea about translation. Notice, in the case of the translation of my latest botanical studies, have had the same experience as you, some passages of capital importance, which my friend Sorat could not understand in my German. I translated into my kind of French. He rewrote them in his own, and I'm quite convinced that in that language they will be more understood than perhaps in German. A certain French lady appears to have thought of using this system already. She has the German translated to her simply and literally, and then proceeds to endow it with a grace peculiar to her own language and her sex. These are the immediate consequences of a general world literature. The nations will be quicker in benefiting by each other's advantages. I should more in this subject, for it's one which calls for a good deal of elaboration. Yeah, really what he wants to say here, I think, yeah, I think this idea is enough if I highlight this. Really, yeah, he wants to say that sometimes when in translation, he wants to say, you know, when you read something, maybe in the original, you'll find it difficult, but when it's translated to other language, maybe you'll find it easier and friendlier, and you like it, and you say, wow, you know, and he's saying, well, that's good, that's fine, that's fine. If people think the German language is horrible and they translate it to French and they love it in their French, that's fine, that's good. But you see, this is the idea, the role of translation. We know we have to have, really here is the idea, we have to have good translators. we have to have really good translators, and that's the idea, good translation. You know, there are the immediate consequence of a general world literature. Then the nations, he said, the nations will be quicker in benefiting by each other's advantages. Yeah, because each one of us, maybe each one of us has his or her own merits or demerits or advantages or disadvantages, and we can take from each other. You know, in translation, he's saying, in translation, we can get the good thing, and we don't want the bad thing, you know? And I think this is quite interesting and funny to some extent to see. Now, the next man really to talk about here, I don't know if I have time here, I still have 10 minutes, is our friend Marx, well, friends, I should say, Marx and Engels. These are the men I mentioned, the German philosophers and thinkers, and they were really the real founders of Marxism and socialism and communism in Europe and throughout the world today. You know, they were writing in well, they were German Jews, really Germans living in, well, they lived later in their, at the end of, well, maybe in the last few years of their lives, they lived in London. They were writing in London, but originally they were Germans and they were writing in German, and they wrote everything to do with the writings was in German because they are Germans. As you can see, Karl Marx, born 1818, died 1883, and Friedrich Engels, again, 1820, died 1895. You know, these two men, these two characters, they were really, as I said, they were the founders of what you call Marxism. And because Marxism really came from the name Marx. I don't know why we don't say Anglicism instead of Anglicism or instead of Marxism. Well, maybe we have to discuss this later on. So these people here have something to say about literature and about world literature. And they say literature is the ownership of people, is a product. Again, here to go back to Damrosch, and I will come back later to Damrosch, maybe next week. You know, here Engels and Marx gave this idea about the question of ownership and the question of production and the question of consumption, how people consume and you know, as if they are taking something produced by society, by people, and that's why it's the ownership. Is not private, is not you know, singular, but it is common and it's social. And that's why when you say here communism and you know, which is the common property of everything. Now, Marx and Engels were originally, of course, writing about politics and about economy, really the writings about economy. Notice here I say, are well known as social scientists, political theorists, philosophers, and fathers of Marxism, which is both an economic and socio-economic or socio-political overview or worldview, and a theory of the development, reproduction, and transformation of capitalism. So the idea here, they are saying that the result of capitalism is of course, he is saying, is socialism, and as you can see what he said. Now, one of the main theories, or one of the main ideas that he said, were the main tenets of this theory is the distinction between the base, or notice here, the base, the forms of economic organization and modes of production. Okay, the base, the forms of economic organization or modes of production. So, as if to say, the people, here we say the base means the common absolute, society, people, laymen and women, society, and forms of production or forms of economic organization, or we say modes of production. And these are taken from originally from tribalism and feudalism in capitalism and communism. And here we say the question of, again, the superstructure ideology or forms of social consciousness, again, such as religion, law, politics, art, etc., etc. And from this way, he elaborated, or they elaborated on the idea of literature, as we shall see, or the language. Now, remember, we are not talking here today about politics or about communism or about socialism or about politics or religion or anything of the sort. We're talking here about literature and what is world literature in their view. In their view, they think that literature is a production, is a common production, and the consumption and the importance and the role of all of society is part of it, is the idea here. Language in general, and as the substance of literature in particular, authors approached, is another kind of social practice, and therefore is rooted in the material conditions of the base. So he's saying, because literature is something produced, something done, something like substance, right? So it is in this way some kind of social practice, some kind of social practice, and some kind of, influenced, he said, influenced through the material conditions of society, the material conditions of society. This notwithstanding, therefore, literature, we say, is relatively autonomous. Literature is relatively autonomous, meaning is not autonomous. Literature has something to do with us, is not separated from us. We have something to do with literature. Literature is talking about us, people. Therefore, we don't say literature is just literature and it's art only and art for art's sake. No. No. Really, he wants to say that literature is something social, absolutely to do with us, human beings, with the way we are, with the way we exist, the way we live, the way we fight, the way we. You see, so this is the idea. He said, relatively autonomous means maybe halfway autonomous, halfway independent, halfway free of control. Well, this is the idea here, really, if you like. And he goes on about that, but his statement, I'll read just this, maybe this paragraph, and I will stop because I think the time is running fast and we are getting tired. Well, maybe you are getting tired and I am getting tired because I'm talking all the time and you are not talking. Really here we say Marx and Engels, really, they talk about this question of, they examine the Marxist conceptions of society as a literary, as a history of class struggles. Yeah, because for them, really, they talked a lot and they mentioned a lot the idea of class struggle. Class struggle, as we say in Arabic, we say as-sira' al-tabaqi, as-sira' al-tabaqi, and that's really the idea, class struggle, really. It is, yeah, because there are always this gap and these are differences and they carry on between classes. People always say, I'm rich, I'm richer, you are poor, you are nothing, I'm, richer than you, blah, 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 blah. And that's true. That's true. There are classes everywhere in any society, every society, there are classes. And this idea here, he wants to say that really literature is affected by this question of class struggle. Notice here, the intellectual creations of single nations, including literature, are not nation specific any longer, but the common property of the world. Wow. Look what he's saying. And that's why we say, common property of all people, not just a nation. He was saying Shakespeare is not only for the English. Goethe is not only for the Germans. Goethe is for all other people in the world. Goethe is not owned by Germans only. Likewise, Shakespeare is not owned by the English only. And that's what he's saying here. Intellectual creations. That's why today when we read Shakespeare, we understand him the way we want. We take from him the thing that we want, the thing that we find interesting and useful. So that's what he say, intellectual creation, okay, of single nations, including literature, are not nation specific any longer, meaning Shakespeare and his plays are not owned by the English, no more owned by the English only. We own them in the same way. You see, he said the common property of the world. Wow, of the world, common property of the world. And that's why maybe some people think, and that's why we don't need the permission. We don't need the permission from anybody to say that Shakespeare is good or bad, or this novel is good or bad or anything, because this novel is ours in the same way that it is written by its own society or its own class or its own people and so on. Okay, I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think I will stop here and I will continue from there next time. If you have any question, please ask, and I'm going to yeah, I'm going to stop recording.